New Jersey governor has recently overturned a Prohibition-era law that was really preventing breweries, tap rooms, restaurants from growing. Now, I could take the approach I have been and just hammering home things that are really bad for small businesses, workers' rights, but I decided to take a lighter approach, and we're going to talk about 50 states, 50 weird beer laws. This is Hopped Up. What is going on, everyone? Josh here with another edition of That's Hopped Up, a little bit lighter on the side of things. I don't want to go too much into how laws are hurting things or how laws are only benefiting filthy rich distributors that have mansions and basketball courts and indoor pools and all sorts of like that while their workers are making jack squat unless they're unionized. We're going to talk about laws from Prohibition that are still trickling into today's society. Systemic prohibition laws, some would say. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. This is from vinepair.com, but first, we're going to drink a beer while we do this. Now, this is Gus Polinsky, head of the Kenosha Kickers, approved. This is a can of the Origins of Polka, a Saz hop, Czech-style Pilsner, 5% ABV, with notes of light honey, juicy lemon, sweet orange blossom from Hop Butcher for the World out of Chicago, Illinois, and the artwork is superb. Dan Jetsa does it again. The accordion on this, it's not quite a button box. It's got the keys too. My grandma plays button box accordion. This has keys on it, but it is very punk rock looking. It looks like it's had its fair share of playtime, live shows, and all that. There has been some sweat on the dance floor to this accordion. But I love Hop Butcher stuff. I love the artwork. This one should be a sweet, light citrusy Pilsner, which most Pilsners are sweet. I shook this beer up too much because it is all over the place. I'm going to pour it, and then I'm going to go get, I suppose, paper towels to clean it up. I poured it hard. Keep an eye on it. Make sure it doesn't spill some more. I'll be right back. All right, a little bit of paper towel makes the drink spill go away. Alcohol abuse, I know, but hey, it happens to the best of us. Maybe the first time, but it won't be the last time. That's an emo band lyric that I do not remember who it is. Anyway, check this beer out. All right, now I am a firm believer in the hard pour. I'm also a firm believer in the nose oil. Let's kill the head on this beer, and it works. It's science. Bill Nye the Science Guy, where are you at? Because I want the science behind how nose oil breaks down the beer head. I want your opinion. I could probably read it somewhere, but I don't want that. I want you to explain it to me. Bill Nye the Science Guy. The head's already going down. This is a very nice, light straw beer. You can see through it. I can kind of see the shadow of the camera through this beer. Nice, white, vibrant head on it, like very bright white. Oh, that nice maltiness, like a sweetness to it. Getting a little bit of that citrus vibe. Nothing much more than that, but very malt forward. I love the smell of this beer. I'm going to pour a little bit more in. And we're going to get started on our topic of 50 states, 50 wild beer laws from the Prohibition era, alphabetical order. And we are starting with Alabama. Now, this one involves a very interesting word. Now, Alabama does not technically have any dry counties. What they have are moist counties. Moist counties. Moist counties. Now, in these counties, they're mostly dry, right? But if a city within the county has more than 1,000 people, residents living there, over the age of 20, or of voting age, I suppose, they can vote to allow that city to sell booze. And you can buy it in the city, just not outside of the city. Another law I don't quite understand, because if you're anywhere in the county, just drive to the city, buy the beer. So why not just make it statewide? Again, these are ridiculously weird laws where the age of consent is probably questionable. Moving on to number 2, Alaska. Now I might break this up into 2 parts, because 50 states, we're only on number 2, and we're probably really cruising through this one here. After this one, I'm going to take my first drink of this beer. Alaska legislation prohibits entertainment in brewery tap rooms. This is not just like live acts like dudes playing covers of Lit. This also includes television, games, and dancing. Now, like I said, some of these are current, some of them are kind of going to the wayside. As of the 1st of this year, 2024, they will allow tap rooms to have 4 live concerts a year. TVs, however, are still frowned upon. Now, I understand this because Alaska has a drug problem, they have a drinking problem, it's cold there, and you spend a lot of times indoors. And when you spend time cooped up, there's only 2 things you can do: make babies and make bad decisions. And Alaska has chosen to do both. Moving on to Arizona. Okay, Arizona is a little more lax for being in the West and slightly red. A lot of these laws I have a problem with because why are you restricting people's freedoms to do what they want and making something, I'm not going to say harmless, but something not as dangerous, illegal? Okay, give people the right to go buy a beer. Until 2010, Arizona prohibited people from buying booze on Sunday before 10 o'clock. Now it's to 6 a.m. and you can, you should just be able to buy beer whenever. I guess it's a bad idea because you get out of the bar, you still want to party, you're going to go to that store, and you're going to crack them open once you're in the car. That's just the way that works. Let me try the Origins of Polka. Hot butcher for the world. Nice, straight up Pilsner as a base. Delicious Pilsner as a base. A touch of sweetness, not like overly sweet, and a little bit of like a citrus and honey effect to it going on here. I love that flavor. A very nice light mouthfeel. 5% ABV, you could really slam this thing. I love it. But then again, I love everything that Hot Butcher can do. Moving on to the next A. Arkansas, or as I like to say, Arkansas. Each of Arkansas's 29 dry counties can establish private clubs that are permitted to sell alcohol through the state's Alcohol Beverage Control Division. These clubs can sell alcohol if they can demonstrate they're a nonprofit organization that doesn't solely exist to let people knock down drinks. So I gotta tell you, these are probably just bingo halls. These are our Catholic-backed bingo halls. Arkansas. Is that what it is? Well, that might be Baptist. So either way, that's probably what's going on down there. Now, since we don't have any states that begin with a B, besides Boise and Boston, we're moving on to C. Now, the first state into the C's is California. Prior to 2015, California craft distilleries could not sell their product directly to consumers. The law changed for the better from 2015 and 2018, but not by much. Guests could only buy a bottle if they went through a tasting in a tasting room first. How nuts is that? In order to buy something from the brewery, I have to go through a tour, and then I can buy a bottle? I mean, my Stone Chocovesa, I would not be able to handle only getting it like that. I'd be doing several breweries a day if that's allowed, which we get to more laws, you might see that might not be allowed. Now, this is very strange. The next one is Colorado, and there are some darn good breweries coming out of Colorado. Convenience and chain grocery stores couldn't sell full-strength beer until 2019. Previously, they could only offer beer with an alcohol by weight of no less than 3.2% or 4% alcohol by volume. What? So people are just buying at that time, and now you're just buying quantity. Now this almost seems like a big beer law, right? You have these big beer companies that sell lower ABV beers. Hey, we can sell more of it. These small guys that sell the delicious higher ABV stuff, they're just not going to be able to compete. That's what that sounds like to me. Next is Connecticut. Bar and tavern are not interchangeable terms in Connecticut. Bars are permitted to serve liquor. Taverns, not so much. Both can serve beer and wine, though. That one's weird. There's got to be some weird thing behind that one as well. But if you're going out as a group of people, you're going to pick a bar every time because people have different flavors, right? So the taverns I could see are hurt by that law. I don't understand why you'd open a tavern. We're also including Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. prohibits bars from using any imagery associated with a religious holiday for promotional purposes. So no Jesus on the cross with 240s of Mickey's and everyone partying below him. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. Delaware. You can't buy beer or wine in a grocery store from Delaware. You also can't purchase booze before noon on Sundays, which represents relative progress. Sunday liquor sales were banned here until 2003. You couldn't buy any alcohol on Sunday at all. This is what I'm talking about. And this is weird because this is Delaware. So this is pretty high north. Now, you see a lot more extreme laws on alcohol when you get towards the South, Bible Belt states, and stuff like that. Now, on to Florida. This one I expected to just kind of blow me out of the water. I'm like, Florida's wild. Some things are extremely open about, and some things are like, you're not doing that here. But Florida's craft distilleries used to be limited to selling 6 bottles of liquor per person per year. A law that kneecapped their ability to generate on-site revenue. The law wasn't repealed until 2021. That's 3 years ago. 6 bottles. So you say you have a favorite bottle of gin that you make gin and tonics with. Say you're a gin and tonic person. And like maybe a month you go through 2 bottles. Well, you're only going to make it 3 months. Then you got to go to some other kind of gin. You got to find a second favorite gin, which I mean, that's doable. But if you want to go to your favorite, if you go to a favorite beer. I get Miller High Life all the time. If I could only buy 6 12-packs of Miller High Life a year, I'd be pretty bummed out. And again, you're going to notice a theme. A lot of these laws are just hindering small businesses, small distilleries, small breweries. It's going to hinder their ability to grow and prosper. Moving on to Georgia. Brian the Beer Snob. Blue Ice. Let's talk about your state. I'm sure you have more detail about some of these things. Brian, I think you've talked about how your state, you can't buy a certain beer over, you can't buy beer over a certain ABV. I believe that's right. Archaic blue laws prohibit Sunday sales of alcohol in Georgia until 2011. However, cities in the Peach State still reserve the right to enact their own Sunday booze bans. So if your city doesn't want to sell booze on Sundays, you're not getting any. Better stock up Saturday if you have the time to. Moving on to Hawaii. The Aloha State. In Hawaii, you're not allowed to have more than 1 drink in front of you at any time. This also applies if you're not sitting at the bar. If you approach the bartender and order 2 drinks, you must point out the person who's going to be enjoying the second drink. Now, on the way up to the bartender, I'm already looking at people that are open. Yeah, like that guy over there, him over there, her, and him. Yeah, I need 6 beers. When I'm in Hawaii, I'm thinking about having a good time and partying. I want a beer in each hand. All right, moving on. Idaho. I think we're moving through these pretty quick. I don't know. We're probably only like 11 in. But house-infused spirits, in-house barrel-aged cocktails, and house-made cordials are illegal in Idaho. The state takes the law seriously, as its alcohol beverage control unit occasionally conducts raids on bars they suspect may be in violation. So you can't have house-infused spirits, in-house barrel-aged cocktails, and house-made cordials. So you can't alter anything that's going on there. But then again, when it comes to Idaho, what are you going to put inside your stuff besides a potato? Come on, feel the Illinois. Chicagoland area's connection with Prohibition and notorious figures like Al Capone left scars that took decades to heal. Larger Chicago suburbs like Evanston, Wheaton, and Oak Park remained dry well into 1970s and 1980s, and some smaller surrounding towns stayed dried until the 21st century. The last burb to go wet, South Holland, only did so in early August of 2023. We had a suburb of Chicago that was dry until 2023. I don't know how big these suburbs are. I got to imagine in this place like Chicago, these suburbs are pretty big. So if you're like in the middle of your suburb, or you don't have a car, you're probably going quite the distance to buy some alcohol. Indiana. You can't buy cold beer in an Indiana grocery, convenience, or drugstore. It's also the only state in the union that regulates alcohol sales by temperature. The official rationale behind the law is a fear that people will pop open a beer as soon as they exit the store, although others claim it's pushed by liquor store industry lobbyists afraid of losing beer sales. So in my experience, I think like the grocery stores, the bigger stores like that, they don't necessarily need to sell cold beer. Leave that to the convenience stores or the smaller stores. Let them get that revenue. Big stores, you're already making money off of all this other stuff. You don't need to be stealing it from other stores. Finally, Iowa. It's illegal for guests to establish their own barroom credit in Iowa. In other words, regulars can't go into a bar and say, put it on my tab and pay it on a later date. You do that now, and you're never going to see that person again. Now, however, here's where Iowa scores some points. They were the first state in 2020 to make cocktails to go permanent. Hey, bud, take this on the road. That is wild. Moving on to Kansas. Kansas was actually the state that had prohibition the longest, from 1881 to 1948. Now, with these laws also comes their dry by default law, which all counties are dry by default unless voted to become wet. Yes, you need the voters' consent in order to become a wet county in Kansas. Kentucky. Now, this is strange. This is a bourbon state, right? So you got to imagine maybe their laws are favoring those, or maybe the big breweries. I think Prohibition, once it was repealed, helped out a certain group of people exponentially, right? Certain people benefited from it being repealed a lot more than most people. Kentucky, the beating heart of American distilling scene, was still home to 10 dry counties as of 2022. This number represents progress. The dry county count was close to 40 a decade earlier. So in 2012, there were 40 dry counties. And today, there's only about 10. Again, the whole idea of having a dry county, you can just go to a different county and buy it. Now, I don't know if you get caught in your house with alcohol. I mean, that might be county by county. Are you going to get in trouble? Like, if you're sitting outside having a beer in a dry county, are you going to get in trouble? After you mow your lawn in Kentucky, are you going to get in trouble for cracking open a cold Miller High Life if you're in a dry county? That's what I want to know. The Soul L state, Louisiana. Perhaps no state exemplifies the twisted pretzel that is state-level liquor laws more than Louisiana. 100 milliliter mini bottles of booze were banned in the state until 2014. However, drive-through daiquiri stations have been part of Louisiana landscape since 1981. Now, I took a youth group trip to New Orleans in Louisiana when I was in the 8th grade. And they had hurricane stands, dispensers in the hotel lobby for the guests. They had non-alcohol for the kids, and they had alcohol for the adults. So not being able to buy 100 milliliter bottles because, you can just swig them, that's insane to me. But I think New Orleans is the exception to the rule when it comes to Louisiana, because a lot of the surrounding areas are probably a little more conservative with how they see booze and partying and stuff like that. Moving on to Maine. From 1937 until 2014, it is illegal for Maine bars to display the alcohol content of their beverages or use phrases like high proof on their menus or signage. While the law's origins are a bit muddled, it's speculated that it was written to crack down on post-prohibition beer ads that overemphasize their strength. You got to think, people weren't allowed to drink beer for a while, so after that ban was lifted, they're probably like, hey, come get this 10% banger. And I'm sure it wasn't 10%. Maybe it was, because I think they were a little bit more wild with the ABVs that they were drinking before. I don't think like the Bud Light and the Budweisers really came into play until later on. Somewhere along the line, we got used to drinking pretty crappy beer, and that all changed how many years ago, and we all benefit from it. Maryland is next. In 1978, Maryland legislation prohibited chain grocery stores and convenience stores from selling beer and wine. It's a more convoluted law than it initially appears. Due to grandfather clauses and other specialized provisions, a handful of stores that would otherwise be restricted from beer and wine sales can stock both items on their shelves. Politics can be a pretty gray area. A lot of shady stuff goes on. This is one of them, and this is one that really pisses me off, but we're not going to get into that because you've seen me pissed off about other things similar to that. Moving on to Massachusetts, in 1984, Massachusetts became the first state to ban happy hour. 7 other states, Alaska, Indiana, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Utah, and Vermont, have since enacted similar bans. Utah, that doesn't surprise me. Alaska, again, weird stuff going on up there. Indiana, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island. Okay, all these seem pretty reasonable. Vermont, maybe not so much. In the Northeast. Indiana, that's, again, pretty reasonable. But to ban happy hour, I mean, it's just you get a discount. It's marking down things that are overly marked up. Like the place is still making business because now you're buying more instead of, I don't know. This is just, a lot of these laws, when you hear them, they're one tracked, and anything that you throw at them breaks them apart. It's just the person presenting them is so stubborn, and the people that are for it are so stubborn, nothing happens because of it. And these laws remain intact. On to my state, Michigan. Let's see what old Michigan has to offer. In 1945, Michigan passed a law prohibiting women from being bartenders at an establishment unless they were, as law stated, the wife or daughter of the male owner. Several bars ignored the ban, and a subsequent lawsuit made it to the U.S. Supreme Court, where it lost 6-3. Michigan eventually lifted the ban in 1955. Sadly, this wasn't an isolated case. California, for example, didn't allow women to bartend until 1971. Women, get out of our bars. Why? I don't know. This probably whole the I see a woman when I'm drinking and I'm going to sin. It's probably that whole aspect. It's probably religious guilt. That's why we don't want women bartending, because it's their fault when I have a drink and I harass them when they're behind the bar, or tip them and leave my phone number on the tab and they don't call me back, and now I'm pissed. Minnesota's distilling laws allow state micro distilleries to produce 40,000 proof gallons per year. If they exceed this limit, they get hit with a hefty state excess tax on what they produce, and their licensing fee quintuples. Now, quintuples, for some of you, definitely not me, might be confusing. So I'm going to put that quintuples, I'm going to put what it is on the screen for you, not for me, because I definitely know what it means. I'm just going to show you and not tell you. These sharp increases make it difficult for ambitious distilleries to grow, compelling some producers to move their facilities to neighboring, more distiller-friendly states. Minnesota, what are you doing? Now, that's not so bad because, I mean for breweries, but distilleries, yeah, I can see that how that would be difficult. Minnesota's got some pretty good breweries. Make sure you check out their breweries. On to Mississippi. Mississippi. You cannot say the state without spelling it. Prohibition was still a thing in Mississippi until 1966. The repeal primarily occurred because several state legislators, including Governor Paul Johnson Jr., got caught at a Mardi Gras ball in Jackson with alcohol present. The governor signed off on the repeal shortly thereafter, making it the last state to overturn prohibition on state level. This law is here to help you. I'm fine. I can drink it. I believe in myself. It's just you peasants that can't partake in the fun. We don't trust you. Again, shady people doing shady things. Missouri. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, I was once in a Jeep with 3 other people, so there's 4 of us, and we had 3 beers open. Now, one of us didn't drink, but that wasn't the driver. So the driver would take a drink and just hand the beer back over to the person sitting in the passenger seat. I think this was Missouri, because at the time, I don't know if this has changed, or I don't know if this is true, you could have 1 less open beverage in the vehicle than you could have people. So you have 4 people, you can have 3 open beverages. So that's how we were riding. And looking back, as a father, as responsible for life, my life, and 3 others, that's hopped up. Moving on to Montana. Montana distilleries can only serve customers 2 ounces of their spirits per day. This doesn't mean 2 ounces of each spirit they produce. We're talking about 2 ounces of spirits combined. Montana breweries, on the other hand, can serve up to 48 ounces of beer per person on the daily. Yes, I will have half an ounce of the vodka, half an ounce of the gin, and just 1 ounce of the tequila. Please. 48 ounces. So you can get 48 ounces should be enough from a brewery. But hear me out. You have a beer. You have a couple beers. Now all of a sudden you want to get a growler to take home. You might be limited. They might have to sell you a growler, or you might not be able to buy anything at all. That's messed up. That's hopped up.